Marcus Webb had been planning this for 6 months. Tonight he would finally tear down that church on Jefferson Street. Not because it was old, not because it was unsafe, but because of who prayed inside it. Black faces, black voices, black hands raised to a God Marcus didn't even believe in. To him they didn't deserve to worship anywhere. He swung the sledgehammer toward the altar with all his hatred. But just before it hit, the room filled with a light that shouldn't exist. And there, standing between him and his target, was a man who knew everything Marcus had ever done. The planning had started on a cold January night, when Marcus sat alone in his trailer on the outskirts of Birmingham, Alabama. He'd been scrolling through local news on his cracked phone screen, drinking cheap whiskey, when he saw the article. Mount Zion Baptist Church was celebrating its 75th anniversary. The photograph showed elderly black congregants smiling on the church steps. Something dark twisted in Marcus's gut. His father's voice echoed in his head, those same hateful words he'd heard every day of his childhood. Marcus had never questioned those teachings. He'd built his entire identity around them, and now, looking at those happy faces, he felt personally insulted. They were thriving. They were joyful. They had community and purpose while he had nothing but anger. He threw his phone against the wall and made a decision that would change everything. Marcus Webb was 42 years old, but his face looked a decade older. Years of rage had carved deep lines around his mouth and forehead. His eyes held a hardness that made people step back when they encountered him. He worked construction jobs when he could get them, moving from town to town across Alabama and Mississippi, never staying long enough to form real connections. He had no wife, no children, no genuine friends, just a growing collection of resentments and a mind poisoned by decades of carefully cultivated hatred. His father, Robert Webb, had been a bitter man who blamed everyone else for his failures. Black people, immigrants, the government, religious institutions, all of them were supposedly responsible for why Robert Webb died drunk and alone at 53. Marcus inherited his father's rusty trailer, his debts, and most importantly, his hatred. He wore that inheritance like armor, never questioning whether any of it was true. The world had been unfair to his father, therefore the world was unfair to him. Someone had to pay, and Marcus had decided exactly who would pay the price for every disappointment in his life. Mount Zion Baptist Church stood on Jefferson Street in a neighborhood that had transformed dramatically over the decades. It was a modest wooden structure, painted white with a simple cross on the roof. The building had been constructed in 1950 by black families who pooled their limited resources during an era when they weren't welcome in white churches, when segregation was law and violence was common. Over 7 decades, Mount Zion had survived everything. A suspicious fire in 1968 during the riots that followed Dr. King's assassination. Severe flooding in 1979, when the nearby creek overflowed. Economic decline in the 80s and 90s when most businesses abandoned the neighborhood. Through it all, Mount Zion remained standing. Its congregation had shrunk from 200 vibrant members to about 30 regulars, mostly elderly people who'd worshipped there their entire lives. The church couldn't afford major repairs. The building needed foundation work. The piano was out of tune. The hymnals were falling apart. But every Sunday morning and Wednesday evening, those faithful members gathered to sing, pray, and hold on to something their grandparents had fought to build. They had no idea someone was planning to destroy it all. Marcus began his research methodically. He discovered through public records that the church had serious foundation issues. The building was technically classified as unsafe according to a city inspection from 3 years ago. The congregation couldn't afford the $50,000 needed for repairs. This was his opening, his justification. He spent weeks filing anonymous complaints with city officials, using fake email addresses and claiming to be concerned neighbors. He researched demolition permits and discovered how easy it was to acquire one for a condemned building if you claimed to own the property or had authorization. Marcus forged documents with frightening ease. He created fake company letterhead. He lied smoothly to city officials about being hired by the church to handle the demolition. The bureaucracy worked in his favor. No one questioned a white man with official-looking paperwork, claiming he had permission to tear down a black church in a poor neighborhood. By late May, Marcus had everything: a legal demolition permit, rented equipment including a sledgehammer, and a date circled on his calendar, June 19th, Juneteenth. He chose that specific date deliberately because he knew it would hurt them more. The symbolism wasn't lost on him. Pastor Samuel Johnson was 68 years old and had led Mount Zion faithfully for 33 years. He was a tall man with white hair and gentle eyes that had witnessed both the worst and best of humanity. Samuel had been 12 years old during the Freedom Summer of 1964, when civil rights workers came to Mississippi to register black voters. He remembered white men with pure hatred in their eyes. He remembered churches bombed and burned. He remembered attending funerals for children killed simply because of their skin color. He remembered his own father being beaten unconscious for trying to register to vote. But Samuel also remembered extraordinary courage. He remembered people singing hymns while being beaten by police. He remembered communities rebuilding what violence had destroyed. He remembered love proving stronger than hate, again and again. When he became pastor of Mount Zion in 1992, he made a solemn promise. This church would remain a place of genuine hope and unconditional welcome. Over 33 years, he'd kept that promise. He'd buried beloved members. He'd baptized babies and watched them grow. He'd counseled families through crises. He'd fed homeless people from the church kitchen. And every night he prayed for the same things. He prayed for his congregation's health. He prayed for resources to repair their building. And he prayed that God would soften the hearts of those who still carried racial hatred. On the evening of June 18th, Pastor Samuel received an urgent call from Sister Mary Washington. She was 74 years old and had been playing piano at Mount Zion since 1965. Her voice trembled with fear. "Pastor, something feels wrong. I drove past the church and there's a large truck parked outside with equipment on it. And there was a white man walking around our building, measuring and taking photographs. He looked so angry, Pastor. The kind of angry that means trouble." Samuel felt cold fear spreading through his chest but kept his voice steady. "I'll go check on it, Sister Mary. Don't worry. Could be the city finally sending someone about those repairs." But when he arrived 20 minutes later, the truck was gone. Everything looked normal. The church stood quiet in the fading light. Samuel unlocked the door and walked inside. The familiar smell of old wood and candle wax greeted him. Everything seemed fine, but something felt different. The air felt heavy, waiting. Samuel knelt at the altar and prayed for nearly an hour. He prayed for protection. He prayed for wisdom. He prayed that whatever was coming, God would give them strength to face it. He had no idea his prayers were already being answered in ways he couldn't imagine. Marcus sat in his truck 3 blocks away, watching through binoculars as the old pastor locked up and drove away in a car that should have died years ago. He felt satisfaction mixed with contempt. These people had nothing. They clung to a falling apart building and a God who clearly didn't care. Tomorrow he would end their delusion. He would prove their faith was worthless and their prayers went nowhere. Marcus had stopped believing in God at 15 when his mother died of cancer despite thousands of prayers. His father had used her death as proof that God played favorites. "God don't listen to poor white folks," Robert Webb had told his son while drunk. "He's too busy helping them." Marcus absorbed this poison as truth. Now at 42 he couldn't imagine believing in anything beyond what he could see and control. Faith was weakness. Hope was delusion. Tomorrow he would demolish both. June 19th arrived hot and humid. Marcus woke at 5 a.m., heart pounding with anticipation. He loaded his tools methodically. The sledgehammer felt right in his hands. He'd chosen it because it required personal effort. He wanted to feel every impact. He wanted to destroy that church with his own strength and hatred, not just watch a machine do it. Marcus arrived at Jefferson Street at 6 a.m. The neighborhood was quiet. He parked directly in front of Mount Zion, blocking the entrance. The demolition permit was displayed on his dashboard. Everything was legal. Everything was planned. He grabbed the sledgehammer and walked to the door. His hands were steady. His mind was clear. He felt powerful and righteous. He kicked the door open violently and stepped inside. Morning light filtered through stained glass windows, creating colored patterns on the floor. Marcus raised his sledgehammer and swung at the nearest window. Glass exploded spectacularly. The sound echoed like a gunshot. He smiled grimly. The second window shattered, then the third. Marcus moved through the church systematically, destroying everything. He smashed the old piano, sending keys scattering. He knocked over pews, listening to them crack and splinter. He tore hymn books apart, scattering pages like confetti. All those hopeful words about God making things right. All lies. All garbage. He was doing the world a favor by erasing these delusions. Sweat poured down his face as he worked. His muscles burned, but he didn't stop. This was the most purposeful he'd felt in years. Every swing felt like revenge against every disappointment he'd experienced. By the time Marcus reached the altar, he was breathing hard. This was the heart of the church where Pastor Samuel had preached for 33 years about love and forgiveness. Marcus hated it with surprising intensity. He raised the sledgehammer high, gripping it with both hands. Every muscle tensed, his teeth clenched. This was the moment. The final blow, the symbolic destruction of everything these people believed. He began the downward swing with all his strength and accumulated hatred, but something impossible happened. The room flooded with brilliant light, not sunlight, not electric lights. This was different. It came from everywhere and nowhere, warm and golden. It didn't hurt his eyes, but he couldn't look away. The sledgehammer froze in midair like it hit an invisible wall. Marcus's arms locked. His entire body became paralyzed. Terror flooded through him. Then the light began to take shape. The figure materialized directly in front of the altar, exactly where Marcus's hammer would have struck. It was a man, about 6 feet tall with shoulder-length dark hair and a beard, wearing simple white robes with a red sash. His feet were bare. His hands hung open and empty. There was no glow now, just a man standing calmly. But his presence filled the entire building. Marcus tried to move but couldn't. He tried to speak but his voice was gone. His heart pounded violently. This couldn't be real. He didn't believe in God or miracles. This had to be his mind, playing tricks. Heat exhaustion. Maybe he'd hit his head. But then the man stepped forward, and when he spoke, his voice was undeniably real. Marcus Webb, he said quietly, and hearing his name made Marcus's blood turn to ice. You can lower the hammer now. You won't be needing it anymore. Marcus's arms obeyed before his brain could process what was happening. The sledgehammer dropped and hit the floor with a thunderous crash. He staggered backward, finally able to move, but his legs felt weak. He grabbed a broken pew to keep from collapsing. "Who are you?" he whispered hoarsely. His voice sounded strange, small and frightened. The man looked at him with eyes that seemed infinitely old and infinitely kind. "You know exactly who I am, Marcus. You've known since you saw me." Marcus shook his head violently. "No, you're not real. You can't be. I don't believe in you." A slight smile crossed the stranger's face, sad but understanding. "Your belief doesn't change what is true, Marcus. The sun rises whether you acknowledge it or not." Terror and rage fought for dominance. Marcus wanted to run, but his legs wouldn't cooperate. He wanted to fight, but something told him violence would be useless. So he attacked with words. "If you're really Jesus Christ, then you're a failure." Marcus spat with venom. "Look at this place. Look at these people you supposedly love. They've prayed to you for 75 years and they've got nothing. Their church is falling apart. They're poor. They're suffering. They're ignored. What kind of God are you? What kind of savior abandons his people?" The man's expression didn't change. He didn't look offended. He just looked at Marcus with profound compassion. "They have everything that truly matters, Marcus. They have genuine faith. They have authentic community. They have love that transcends circumstances. They have hope that lifts them above suffering. You have none of those things despite your advantages. So tell me, who is truly poor here?" The question hit Marcus like a physical blow. He had no answer because the truth was undeniable. He'd spent 42 years blaming others for his emptiness, while these people he despised had found something real to hold on to, something that sustained them through hardships he'd never faced. Jesus walked slowly through the destroyed church, his feet crunching on broken glass that didn't cut him. He ran his fingers along broken pews and shattered windows with tenderness. He picked up a torn hymn page and read aloud, "Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost but now am found, was blind but now I see." He looked at Marcus. "Do you know who wrote these words?" John Newton, a former slave ship captain. A man who trafficked human beings for profit. He was by any measure a monster. Yet grace found him. He spent the rest of his life fighting the evil he'd perpetrated, writing songs about transforming love. If grace could reach John Newton, Marcus, why can't it reach you? Marcus felt tears burning but refused to let them fall. "I don't want grace," he said through clenched teeth. "I don't want anything from you. I just want—" He stopped because he didn't know how to finish. What did he want? Revenge against people who'd never harmed him, someone to blame for his failures. The silence stretched as Marcus confronted his emptiness. Jesus moved closer until he stood directly in front of Marcus. Up close, his presence was overwhelming but not frightening. like standing near a fire on a cold night. You want someone to blame, Marcus, Jesus said patiently. You desperately want your pain to be someone else's fault, because if it's not, then you face a terrifying truth, that your father was wrong, that the hatred he taught you was poison, that you've wasted 42 years serving a lie. That's terrifying, isn't it? Because if everything you believed is false, then who are you? Marcus's legs gave out. He collapsed among broken glass and splintered wood, sharp edges cutting through his jeans. Tears came now, hot and unstoppable, decades of suppressed pain breaking through. He was all I had, Marcus sobbed, his body shaking. My father was all I had, and he hated everyone. He told me the world was against us, that black people were taking what should be ours, that God abandoned us. I believed him. I believed every word because he was my father. What else was I supposed to do? Jesus's voice was gentle but firm. You were supposed to choose differently, Marcus. Yes, you were a child, when your father filled your head with lies. That wasn't your fault, but you're not a child anymore. For 27 years since his death, you've had the power to examine what he taught you, to question it, to seek truth. You chose not to. You chose to keep hating because it was easier than healing. But right now, you can choose differently. That choice is still available. It's not too late. Marcus looked up with red eyes. How? How do I stop believing everything I've ever known? How do I let go of 42 years? How do I become someone different? Jesus knelt beside him in the broken glass, his robe somehow remaining spotless. The same way you learn to hate, one day at a time, one choice at a time, one moment of choosing love over fear, truth over lies, healing over familiar pain. It won't be easy. You'll stumble, you'll fall back into old patterns, but each time you choose differently, it gets easier. Each time you choose love, hatred loses power over you. At that moment, the church door burst open. Pastor Samuel Johnson stood in the doorway, breathing hard. He'd received a frantic call from a neighbor about destruction sounds. Behind him were a dozen church members who'd rushed over. Sister Mary Washington was there. Several elderly congregants, despite their health issues, they froze seeing the scene. Their church was destroyed, windows shattered, pews broken, piano demolished, hymn books torn, and in the center a white man they'd never seen was on his knees sobbing. Next to him knelt a stranger in white robes. Pastor Samuel's eyes went wide with recognition. He dropped to his knees immediately. Lord, he whispered. Jesus stood and helped Marcus to his feet. Then he turned to the congregation with profound love. Pastor Samuel Johnson, he said, and the old man's tears flowed faster. For 33 years you have faithfully prayed for the hearts of those who hate you to be softened. You have asked me to bring healing to those who carry racism's poison. You have never stopped believing love could overcome hatred. Tonight your prayers are being answered. He gestured to Marcus, who stood trembling and broken. This man came to destroy your church because he was taught from childhood to hate you. He was taught that your skin color made you less than human. He was taught your faith was worthless, and your lives didn't matter. He believed those lies for 42 years. But tonight those lies end. Tonight he begins learning the truth. If you're willing to help him, if you can show him what real Christianity looks like. The congregation looked at Marcus with expressions he couldn't read. He expected hatred because he deserved it, but instead, he saw something that broke him completely. He saw compassion. Sister Mary Washington stepped forward first. She was 74 and had survived things Marcus couldn't imagine, yet she walked right up to him, looked into his eyes, and said, "Baby, you are so lost, but lost things can be found. Jesus found me when I was lost. He can find you too, child." She reached out and took Marcus's hand, her dark skin against his pale palm. He tried to pull away but she held firm. "Don't be afraid of us, child. We're not your enemy. We never were. We've been praying for people like you our whole lives, and here you are." Other members came forward one by one. They didn't hug Marcus or offer immediate forgiveness. The pain was too fresh, but they stood around him in a circle, forming a barrier against the darkness he'd carried so long. Jesus placed both hands on the broken altar and closed his eyes. The wood beneath his palms began to glow with that same golden light. The light spread outward, like ripples on water, flowing across the floor, up the walls, through the broken windows, touching everything. Everywhere the light touched, impossible things happened. The shattered stained glass windows reassembled themselves, thousands of pieces flying through the air and fitting perfectly back into place. The broken pews straightened and sealed. The demolished piano restored itself completely. Even the torn hymn books gathered their scattered pages and became whole. Within moments, Mount Zion Baptist Church looked better than it had in 50 years. The congregation gasped and wept and praised God. But everyone understood the greatest miracle wasn't the building. It was the man kneeling among them who'd come to destroy but was being remade before their eyes. Marcus felt something shifting deep inside his chest. It started as a small crack in the massive wall he'd built around his heart over 42 years. Then the crack spread and widened until the entire structure came crashing down. All the hatred his father had planted, all the bitterness he'd cultivated, all the rage he'd directed at innocent people, it poured out of him like poison draining from a wound. The release was agonizing and liberating simultaneously. And in the empty space left behind, something new began to grow. It was painful, like bones being reset after healing wrong for decades. He gasped and doubled over, expecting the church members to step back in disgust, but they didn't move away. They stayed close. Sister Mary kept holding his hand. Pastor Samuel put his hand on Marcus's shoulder. They just stayed present while he fell apart and began to be remade. Jesus watched with profound love. "This is how transformation always begins," he said. "Not with perfection but with willingness to change. Not with having all the answers but with admitting you've been asking the wrong questions. Not with deserving grace but with receiving it despite being unworthy." When Marcus finally caught his breath, he looked at the faces surrounding him with new eyes. Really looked at them for the first time, not as stereotypes or threats but as individual human beings with stories and pain and hopes like his own. "I destroyed your church," Marcus said hoarsely. "I came here planning to take away the only thing you had. I wanted to hurt you because of what you looked like and what you believed. I don't know how to make that right." Pastor Samuel squeezed his shoulder gently. "Son, you can't make it right on your own. That's why we need grace. That's why we need Jesus. He doesn't ask us to be perfect before he loves us. He loves us while we're still broken, and then he helps us heal and change." Jesus spoke again. "Marcus, I'm giving you what I've given every broken person who called out to me. A new beginning. Your past doesn't disappear. The pain you've caused doesn't vanish. But you get the chance to become someone different. You get to spend the rest of your life choosing love instead of hate, building instead of destroying. It won't be easy. You'll have to face what you've done. You'll have to make amends where possible. You'll have to learn to see people the way I see them. Can you do that?" Marcus looked around at the restored church, at the people who should hate him but were choosing compassion, at the God he'd claimed didn't exist now offering impossible grace. "I don't know," he admitted honestly. "I've been one way for so long. I don't know if I'm strong enough." Jesus smiled warmly. "Honesty is a good place to start, and you won't do it alone." Pastor Samuel understood immediately what was being asked of them. "Lord, are you saying we should take him in? Teach him? After what he tried to do?" Jesus nodded slowly, his expression both serious and hopeful. "I'm asking you to disciple Marcus Webb the same way you've discipled everyone else who's walked through these doors seeking truth. I'm asking you to love him consistently the way I love him, to be patient with his struggles and setbacks, to correct him firmly when he falls back into old patterns of thinking, to celebrate his growth no matter how small, to show him through your daily lives what the kingdom of God actually looks like when people choose unity over division." The request hung heavy in the air. It was an enormous ask. Marcus had tried to destroy their most sacred space. He represented generations of oppression and violence. Taking him in, teaching him, treating him like family when he'd come as an enemy, it would be one of the hardest things they'd ever attempted. The silence stretched as each member wrestled with what was being asked. Some looked at Marcus with uncertainty. Others looked at Jesus with questions in their eyes. The weight of the decision pressed down on everyone present. Then Sister Mary laughed, and it was a sound of pure unexpected joy that seemed to surprise even her. "Lord, you got a sense of humor bringing this particular child to us of all people. But if you trust us with him, we'll do our best. Won't be easy, might make us all a little crazy before it's done. But I've seen you work miracles my whole life, seen you do impossible things time and time again. I guess I can believe in one more miracle standing right here in front of us." She squeezed Marcus's hand tighter, Besides, if we don't show him what your love looks like, who will? We can't preach about forgiveness on Sunday and refuse to practice it on Monday. That would make us hypocrites, and I didn't survive 74 years to become a hypocrite now. The other members began nodding slowly, one by one, some more hesitantly than others, wrestling with emotions but all ultimately willing to try. "We'll do it, Lord," Pastor Samuel said with quiet conviction. "We'll teach him, we'll love him, we'll show him the truth. It won't be perfect, and we'll probably make mistakes, but we'll do our best with your help." The golden light flared one final time, so bright everyone had to close their eyes and shield their faces. The brilliance was almost unbearable, like staring directly at the sun. When they opened their eyes seconds later, Jesus was gone, vanished as suddenly as he'd appeared. The church was still fully restored, looking more beautiful than it had been in decades. Marcus was still standing in the center of the congregation, trembling and transformed but still himself, still wearing his work clothes covered in dust and sweat. But the supernatural presence had faded, leaving behind only the natural presence of humans choosing to love each other despite every reason not to, despite history and hurt and justified anger. The silence that followed Jesus' departure was profound. No one quite knew what to say or do next. They'd all just witnessed something that defied explanation, something that would change their lives forever. Pastor Samuel was the first to break the silence. He cleared his throat, his voice slightly shaky but gaining strength. "Well then, I suppose we should start with proper introductions since we'll be spending considerable time together. I'm Pastor Samuel Johnson, as this young man here probably gathered. I've been leading this church for 33 years. Welcome to Mount Zion Baptist Church, son." Marcus opened his mouth but no words came out at first. His throat felt tight, constricted by emotion. "I'm Marcus," he finally managed, his voice hoarse and barely above a whisper. "Marcus Webb, and I don't deserve any of this. I don't deserve your kindness or your time or your forgiveness. I came here to destroy everything you have." His voice broke. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." Sister Mary patted his hand gently but firmly. "We know what you came here to do, baby. We saw the destruction before Jesus fixed it all. But that's not who you are anymore, is it? That's who you were 2 hours ago. Jesus just gave you the chance to be someone different. Now you got to decide every single day from now on whether you're going to take that chance or waste it." She looked him directly in the eyes. "And we're going to help you make the right choice, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard." One by one the other members introduced themselves. There was Deacon James Washington, Sister Mary's son, a 52-year-old postal worker with kind eyes and a firm handshake. There was Mother Eunice Taylor, 81 years old and the oldest member of the congregation, who walked with a cane but had a spirit that seemed indomitable. There was Brother Thomas Jenkins, a 65-year-old retired teacher who'd taught at the local elementary school for 40 years. There was Sister Ruth Coleman and her husband Brother David, both in their 70s, who'd been married for 53 years and still held hands during services. There was young Sister Angela Price, only 38, a single mother of 3, who worked 2 jobs and still found time to volunteer at the church. Each person introduced themselves with varying degrees of warmth. Some were more guarded than others, which Marcus completely understood. He'd tried to destroy their church. They had every right to be cautious, even hostile. But none of them were hostile. Wary, yes. Uncertain, definitely. But not hateful. Not even close to the hatred he'd carried for them all these years. The contrast was stunning and humbling. When the introductions were finished, Pastor Samuel gestured to the restored pews. "Why don't we all sit down? It's been quite a morning, and I think we all need a moment to process what just happened here." The congregation slowly took their seats, with Marcus standing awkwardly in the center aisle, unsure where he should go or what he should do. Sister Mary tugged his hand gently. "Come sit with me, child. You're part of this family now, whether you feel ready for it or not." Marcus followed her to a pew, near the front, and sat down carefully, as if afraid the beautiful restored wood might break under him. Sister Mary sat beside him on one side, and Pastor Samuel sat on the other. He felt surrounded, but not trapped. Protected, but not imprisoned. It was a strange feeling for someone who'd spent his entire adult life isolated and alone. Pastor Samuel folded his hands and looked at Marcus thoughtfully. "Son, I'm not going to pretend this is going to be easy for any of us. What you attempted to do today, what you believed about us, the hatred you carried, those are serious things. They don't just disappear because Jesus showed up and performed a miracle. The miracle was giving you the chance to change. But the actual changing, that's going to be hard work, daily work. It's going to take years, not days." Marcus nodded. tears still streaming down his face. I know, I don't expect it to be easy. I don't expect you to trust me, or even like me. I just want the chance to try. To be different. To learn. Good, Pastor Samuel said with a slight smile, because we're going to teach you, but it's going to be on our terms. You're going to come to services here every Sunday, and every Wednesday. You're going to study the Bible with me every Tuesday evening. You're going to volunteer at our community food bank every Saturday morning. You're going to listen to our stories, really listen, and learn about what we've endured and overcome. You're going to do this for at least a year, maybe longer, and if at any point you fall back into old patterns, we're going to call you out on it. We're going to correct you. We're going to hold you accountable. Can you commit to that? Marcus didn't hesitate. Yes. Whatever it takes, I'll do whatever you ask. I owe you that much and more. Sister Mary spoke up. You don't owe us anything, baby. This isn't about debt or payment. This is about transformation. This is about you becoming the man God created you to be instead of the man your father's hatred tried to make you. And let me tell you something important. You're going to fail sometimes. You're going to think or say something hateful out of old habit. When that happens, don't you dare give up. Don't you dare use one failure as an excuse to stop trying. Deacon Washington leaned forward from the pew behind them. I got a question for you, Marcus, and I want an honest answer. Why did you hate us? Not your father's reasons. Your reasons. What did we ever do to you personally? Marcus was silent for a long moment, really thinking about the question. Nothing, he finally admitted, his voice barely audible. You never did anything to me personally. I never even met any of you before today. I hated you because I was taught to. Because my father convinced me that you were the reason for everything wrong in our lives. Because it was easier to blame you than to face the fact that my father was just a bitter, angry man who couldn't take responsibility for his own failures. I hated you because I was miserable and alone, and hating you made me feel like I had purpose, like I understood how the world worked. But I was wrong about everything. The words hung in the air, raw and honest. Deacon Washington nodded slowly. At least you're honest about it. That's something. A lot of folks can't even admit that much. They hold on to their hatred and dress it up in all kinds of justifications and excuses, but you just admitted you had no real reason. That takes guts. Mother Eunice tapped her cane on the floor, drawing everyone's attention. Her voice was strong despite her age. Young man, let me tell you something I learned a long time ago. Hatred is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. It destroys you from the inside out. I've lived 81 years on this earth. I've seen the worst of what humans can do to each other. I was 24 years old when Emmett Till was murdered. I was there during the Freedom Rides. I watched friends get beaten, arrested, killed. I had every reason to hate white people, every reason in the world. But I chose not to. You know why? Because hate would have killed me just as surely as any rope or bullet. I chose to love instead. Not because white people deserved it, but because I deserved to be free from that poison. You're getting that chance now. Don't waste it. Marcus looked at this tiny elderly woman with newfound respect and awe. How did you do it? How did you not hate after everything you went through? Mother Eunice smiled softly. I'm not going to lie and say it was easy. There were days I was so angry I couldn't see straight. Days I wanted revenge. But I had people around me. People like Pastor Samuel's grandmother, who was my best friend, who reminded me that I was better than my anger. They showed me a different way, just like we're going to show you a different way. But you got to want it, son. You got to want to be better more than you want to be comfortable in your hatred. The conversation continued for nearly 2 hours. Different members shared their stories. Sister Ruth talked about her father being denied a job promotion 30 times because of his skin color, always watching white men with less experience get promoted over him. Brother David talked about being pulled over by police 17 times in 1 year for driving while black, always wondering if this would be the time he didn't make it home. Sister Angela talked about her son being followed around stores by security guards, treated like a criminal at age 12 for simply existing. Each story was a window into experiences Marcus had never considered, realities he'd never had to face. And each story chipped away at the false narratives his father had built in his mind. These weren't people taking anything from anyone. These were people fighting every day just to be treated with basic dignity and respect. People who'd built this beautiful church and community in the face of systemic opposition. People who'd survived and even thrived despite everything stacked against them. Finally, Pastor Samuel stood up and addressed the congregation. Brothers and sisters, I think we all need to go home and process what happened here today. This is a lot for everyone. We've witnessed a miracle. We've been given a sacred responsibility. Let's take some time to pray, to think, to prepare ourselves for this journey we're about to take with Marcus. He turned to Marcus. Son, I want you to come back here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Bring some work clothes. The church building is fixed, but there's yard work that needs doing, painting on the outside walls, all kinds of maintenance we've been putting off because we didn't have the manpower. You're going to help us with that. You tried to destroy this church. Now you're going to help maintain it. Understand? Marcus nodded eagerly. Yes, sir. I'll be here, I promise. And Marcus, Sister Mary added, standing up slowly with her cane. Don't you run off tonight and talk yourself out of coming back. Don't you let that old voice in your head, your father's voice, convince you that you can't change or that this is all some kind of trick. Jesus gave you a gift today. We're trying to help you unwrap it, but you got to show up. You got to do the work. I will, Marcus said with conviction he didn't know he possessed. I promise I'll show up. I don't know much anymore, but I know I can't go back to who I was. I can't live with that poison anymore. It almost destroyed me. One by one, the congregation members filed out of the church, each one pausing to say a word to Marcus. Some were warm, others were more reserved, but all of them acknowledged him, acknowledged his presence and his commitment to change. When it was finally just Marcus, Pastor Samuel, and Sister Mary left in the church, the pastor walked over to the restored altar and picked up a Bible. He handed it to Marcus. This is for you. Start reading the Gospel of Matthew tonight. We'll discuss it on Tuesday when you come for Bible study. Pay special attention to chapters 5 through 7, the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus has a lot to say about loving your enemies and praying for those who persecute you. I think you'll find it relevant. Marcus took the Bible carefully, as if it might burn his hands. He'd never owned a Bible, never read one except for bits and pieces his mother had read to him before she died. Thank you, he whispered. For everything, for not calling the police, for not throwing me out, for giving me this chance. Pastor Samuel put a hand on Marcus's shoulder. We're not doing this just for you, son. We're doing it because it's what Jesus commanded us to do. Love your enemies. Forgive those who hurt you. Show mercy to the merciless. These aren't suggestions, they're commandments. And they're hard commandments, the hardest ones to follow. But we're going to try together. Sister Mary walked over and looked up at Marcus, her eyes still sharp despite her age. You got a place to stay tonight, child? You got food? Marcus nodded. I have a trailer about 30 minutes from here. It's not much, but it's something. You make sure you eat something good tonight, she instructed firmly. And you get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. We got a lot of work to do both in this church and in that heart of yours. She poked his chest gently with one finger. And remember, we're going to be watching you. Not because we don't trust you, though honestly we don't yet, and you'll have to earn that. But because we care now. You're our responsibility. Jesus gave you to us and we take that seriously. Marcus felt tears welling up again. He'd cried more in the last few hours than he had in the previous 27 years combined. I won't let you down. I swear I won't. Don't swear to us, Pastor Samuel said gently. Swear to yourself. Swear to the man you're going to become. That's who really matters here. As Marcus walked out of Mount Zion Baptist Church into the late morning sunlight, everything looked different. The neighborhood he'd driven through with contempt just hours ago now looked like just a neighborhood. Houses where people lived their lives. Yards where children played. A community that existed not to threaten him, but simply to exist. His truck was still parked out front, the demolition permit still visible on the dashboard. He reached in and grabbed it, then walked over to a trash can and threw it away. He wouldn't be needing that anymore. The drive back to his trailer felt surreal. Marcus kept replaying everything that had happened. The destruction he'd caused, the light that had filled the church, Jesus standing before him, seeing through him, seeing all of him, the worst of him, and still offering him grace. The congregation that should have hated him but chose something better. When he finally got home, Marcus sat in his truck for a long time, just staring at the trailer that had been his father's and then his. It looked shabby and sad, exactly like his life had been. But maybe it didn't have to stay that way. He went inside and looked around with new eyes. The place was a mess. Beer cans everywhere. Dirty clothes piled in corners. The walls were covered with things his father had hung there, angry slogans and Confederate flags and symbols of hatred that Marcus had never questioned. He started taking them down, one by one, throwing them in garbage bags. It took hours. When he was done, the walls were bare but clean. It was a start. That night, Marcus sat at his small kitchen table and opened the Bible Pastor Samuel had given him. He found the Gospel of Matthew and started reading. The words were strange at first, formal and old-fashioned. But as he kept reading, something began to happen. The words started to make sense, started to speak to something deep inside him that had been sleeping or dead for decades. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Marcus read the words over and over, letting them sink in. He was poor in spirit. He was mourning the waste of his life. He was hungry for something better. Maybe, just maybe, there was hope for him after all. Marcus woke up the next morning at 6 a.m., 2 hours before he needed to be at the church. He barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that brilliant light, heard Jesus speaking his name, felt the moment when 42 years of hatred came crashing down inside him. He lay in bed staring at the bare walls of his trailer, walls that had been covered with symbols of hate just hours ago. The empty spaces where those symbols had hung looked like wounds, raw and exposed, but they were clean wounds, wounds that could finally heal. He got up and showered, standing under the hot water longer than necessary, as if he could wash away not just the physical dirt, but the spiritual filth he'd carried for so long. When he looked in the mirror afterward, he barely recognized himself. Same face, same features, but something in his eyes was different. The hardness was still there, but there was something else now too. Something that might have been hope, fragile and uncertain. He dressed in his work clothes and made coffee, sitting at his kitchen table with the Bible Pastor Samuel had given him. He read more of Matthew until it was time to leave, the words slowly making sense in ways they never had before. Marcus arrived at Mount Zion at 8:30, half an hour early. He sat in his truck across the street, watching the church in the morning light. It looked even more beautiful than it had yesterday after Jesus had restored it. The white paint gleamed. The stained glass windows sparkled in the sunrise. The cross on top stood proud and straight against the blue Alabama sky. It was hard to believe that just 24 hours ago, he'd been planning to destroy this building. Hard to believe he'd been capable of such cruelty, but he had been capable of it. That was the truth he had to face. He'd come here with a sledgehammer and hatred in his heart, fully intending to demolish everything these people held sacred. The fact that Jesus had stopped him didn't erase his intent. The fact that the church had been miraculously restored didn't undo what he'd tried to do. He would have to live with that knowledge, carry that weight even as he worked towards something better. At exactly 9 a.m., Pastor Samuel's old car pulled into the church parking lot. The elderly man got out slowly, moving carefully. He saw Marcus's truck and waved, a simple gesture that somehow meant everything to Marcus in that moment. Marcus got out and walked across the street, his work boots heavy on the pavement. "Good morning, Pastor," he said, his voice still rough from lack of sleep and too much emotion. "Good morning, son," Pastor Samuel replied with a warm smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "I'm glad you came. I'll be honest, I was about 60% sure you'd show up and 40% sure you'd let fear talk you out of it overnight. I'm pleased to see the 60% won out." They walked to the side of the church where a small shed held maintenance equipment. Pastor Samuel unlocked it and showed Marcus inside. "We got lawn mowers, hedge trimmers, paint supplies, all kinds of things we've accumulated over the years. The grass hasn't been cut in 3 weeks because Brother Thomas threw his back out. That's going to be your first job. The front lawn, the back lawn, and around the sides. It's a good bit of work, probably take you 3 or 4 hours if you do it right." And Marcus, the pastor paused, looking him directly in the eyes with an intensity that made Marcus stand straighter. "I want you to do it right. Not fast, but right. Take your time, pay attention to the details. This is holy ground you're caring for now." As Marcus started pushing the old lawnmower across the front lawn, other church members began arriving. Saturday morning was apparently a regular workday for the congregation, different people coming to help maintain the building and grounds. Sister Mary arrived with her son Deacon Washington. Mother Eunice came with Sister Ruth and Brother David. Each person greeted Marcus with varying degrees of warmth, from genuinely friendly to cautiously polite. He didn't blame the cautious ones. He'd earned their suspicion with his actions. The morning sun grew hotter as Marcus worked, climbing steadily toward its midday peak. Sweat soaked through his shirt within an hour. His arms ached from pushing the ancient lawnmower, which clearly needed new blades and probably a complete engine overhaul. But he didn't complain or ask for a break. This was penance and privilege combined. Penance for what he'd tried to do, privilege to be allowed to do it at all. Around 11 a.m., Sister Mary came out with a tall glass of ice water and a sandwich wrapped in wax paper. "You need to eat something and drink something, child. Working yourself to death won't do anybody any good, and it certainly won't prove anything to God." Marcus stopped and accepted the water gratefully, draining half the glass in one long gulp. The cold water felt like salvation running down his parched throat. "Thank you, Sister Mary, but I'm okay. I can keep working. I want to finish this today." "I didn't ask if you could keep working," she said firmly, using the tone of someone who'd raised children and wasn't about to be argued with. "I told you to eat and drink. There's a difference. Now sit down in that shade over there and eat this sandwich, while I tell you something important you need to hear." Marcus did as he was told, sitting under an old oak tree at the edge of the church property. Sister Mary sat beside him on a bench that had been there so long it seemed to have grown out of the ground itself. "You think you got to earn your way back into God's grace by working yourself to death," she said, not as a question but as a statement of obvious fact. "You think if you work hard enough and suffer enough, and prove yourself enough, maybe then you'll deserve the second chance Jesus gave you yesterday. Am I right?" Marcus swallowed a bite of sandwich and nodded slowly. "I guess so. I mean, I have to do something. I can't just accept grace and not do anything to show I'm grateful for it." Sister Mary smiled, but it was a sad smile full of understanding. "Child, that's not how grace works. If you have to earn it, it's not grace anymore. It's wages. It's payment for work done. Grace is getting what you don't deserve and can't possibly earn no matter how hard you try. Jesus gave you that yesterday. Free and clear. Nothing you do today or tomorrow or for the rest of your life will make you more deserving of it than you already are." "But then why am I here?" Marcus asked, genuinely confused by the contradiction. "Why am I cutting grass and doing work if it doesn't matter whether I do it or not?" "I didn't say it doesn't matter," Sister Mary corrected gently but firmly. "I said you can't earn grace, but you can respond to grace. You can let it change you from the inside out. You're not here to earn your salvation, Marcus. You're here to learn how to live like someone who's been saved. You're here to practice being the man Jesus called you to be. That's completely different than trying to earn something you already have." The distinction hit Marcus hard, reframing everything he'd been thinking about. He'd been approaching all of this wrong. He'd been thinking about it like a transaction, something he could balance out through enough good works. But that's not what was happening here. This was transformation, not transaction. After Sister Mary left, Marcus sat under the oak tree for a few more minutes, thinking about what she'd said and watching the other church members work around the building. He'd spent his entire life thinking in terms of transactions, of winners and losers, of who owed what to whom. His father had taught him to see everything that way. Someone got something, which meant someone else lost something. Success was a zero-sum game. Love and grace and mercy were weaknesses that others would exploit if you let them. But what if all of that was wrong? What if there was enough grace to go around for everyone? What if love multiplied instead of divided? What if the whole foundation his father had built for him was not just flawed but completely backwards? The thought was terrifying and liberating at the same time, like standing at the edge of a cliff and realizing you could fly. When Marcus finished the lawn work around 2 p.m., Pastor Samuel inspected it carefully, walking the entire perimeter and examining the edges. "Good work, son. You did this right. Every corner, edges clean. You could have rushed through it to get done faster, but you didn't. That tells me something important about your character and your commitment to doing things with excellence." The afternoon was spent painting walls in the church basement fellowship hall with Brother David and Deacon Washington. Brother David was a quiet man who spoke sparingly but said profound things when he did speak. As they painted, he told Marcus stories about the church's history that made Marcus see the building in an entirely new light. How it had been built by hand in 1950 by men who worked construction during the day and then worked on their church at night and on weekends, sacrificing sleep and time with their families. How the stained glass windows had been installed piece by piece by a woman named Sister Dorothy, who'd learned the craft through a correspondence course because no white craftsman would work on a black church in Alabama in the 1950s. How every single thing in this building represented sacrifice and determination and faith stronger than any opposition. This church has survived a lot, Brother David said as they rolled paint onto the walls with steady practiced motions. Fire, flood, economic depression, white supremacist threats, decades of systemic racism, all kinds of things that should have destroyed it. But it's still here standing strong. You know why? Marcus shook his head, genuinely wanting to know the answer. No, sir. Why? Because we refused to let hate win. Every single time someone tried to tear us down, we built back up stronger. Every time someone said we didn't belong, we planted our feet deeper into this ground. This church isn't just a building made of wood and glass and nails, Marcus. It's a testimony. It's living proof that love is stronger than hate, that faith can move actual mountains, that God keeps his promises even when everything looks hopeless and impossible. Brother David paused in his painting and looked at Marcus directly with eyes that had seen 7 decades of struggle and triumph. You came here yesterday to destroy that testimony, to prove that hate was stronger than love, to tear down what took 75 years of blood and sweat and tears to build. But you failed. Not just because Jesus stopped you, though he certainly did. You failed because you can't destroy faith with a sledgehammer. You can break wood and shatter glass, but you can't break what this place really represents. And now you're part of that testimony too. You're part of the story we're going to tell about the day hate tried to win and love won instead. The words settled into Marcus's heart like seeds in fertile soil, taking root in places that had been barren for decades. He was part of the story now, part of something infinitely bigger than himself, part of a testimony that would outlive him and continue long after he was gone. By the time they finished painting, it was nearly 6 p.m. Marcus was exhausted in a way he'd never been from regular construction work. This was physical tiredness combined with emotional exhaustion from processing everything that had happened in the last 36 hours. His entire worldview had been shattered and was being slowly rebuilt from the ground up. Pastor Samuel found him washing paint rollers in the utility sink, being careful to clean them thoroughly. You did good work today, Marcus. Real good work, honest work done with care and attention. I'm proud of you. The words "I'm proud of you" hit Marcus like a physical blow to the chest. He couldn't remember the last time anyone had said those words to him with genuine warmth and meaning. Certainly his father never had. Robert Webb had only ever expressed disappointment and bitterness and blame. "Thank you, Pastor," Marcus said quietly, his voice thick with emotion he was still learning to express instead of bury. "That means more than you know, more than I can put into words right now." Pastor Samuel squeezed his shoulder. "You're coming to church tomorrow, right? Sunday service starts at 10 a.m. You're expected to be here. This is part of your commitment now." Marcus hesitated, feeling a familiar anxiety rise up. "I don't have nice clothes. I don't have a suit or a tie or anything like that. I don't want to disrespect the church by showing up looking like I just came from a construction site." Pastor Samuel waved his hand dismissively. "God doesn't care what you wear on the outside, son. He cares about what's happening on the inside in your heart and soul. Just come clean and respectful. Wear what you wore today if you want. Or wear whatever you have that's clean. This isn't about impressing anyone with fancy clothes. This is about showing up and being present and allowing yourself to be transformed by worship and community." That night, Marcus went home to his trailer and realized he had a problem he hadn't considered. He'd thrown away all his father's hateful decorations in his fury to cleanse the place. But he'd also thrown away the only pictures he had of his mother. They'd been mixed in with everything else, and in his determination to purge every trace of his father's poison, he'd disposed of them too, without thinking. Panic seized him as he realized what he'd done. He dug through the garbage bags still sitting by his trailer, searching desperately for the photographs. Finally, at the bottom of one bag, he found them. 3 pictures of his mother, Sarah Webb, slightly crumpled but intact. One photograph showed her holding him as a baby, smiling at the camera with genuine joy that lit up her entire face. One showed her in the garden she'd loved more than anything, surrounded by tomato plants heavy with fruit. One showed her at church, the same Pentecostal church where she'd prayed desperately for healing in her final months before cancer took her. Marcus sat on his trailer floor surrounded by garbage bags and held those 3 photographs, really looking at his mother for the first time in 27 years. She'd been beautiful. Not magazine beautiful with perfect features, but real beautiful. Kind eyes that crinkled when she smiled. Gentle expression that spoke of patience and love. Calloused hands from hard work but still tender when they held him. She'd loved him deeply. He remembered that now, pushing past the grief and anger to access older, better memories buried beneath decades of his father's poison. She'd read him Bible stories at night before bed. She'd sung hymns while cooking dinner in their tiny kitchen. She'd told him that God loved everyone. No exceptions, no exclusions, no conditions. And then she'd died, and his father had twisted her memory into something bitter and angry, had used her death as evidence for his hateful worldview, had taught Marcus that her faith had been foolish and her love had been weakness and her God had abandoned her. But what if his father had been wrong about everything? What if his mother's faith hadn't been foolish but wise? What if her love hadn't been weakness but the greatest strength there was? Marcus carefully cleaned the 3 photographs and placed them on his refrigerator with magnets he found in a drawer. His mother deserved to be visible, deserved to be remembered not as evidence of God's cruelty but as an example of genuine faith lived out in daily life. Sunday morning arrived with clear skies and temperatures already climbing toward 90 degrees. Marcus, dressed in his cleanest jeans and a button-down shirt he'd forgotten he owned, found pushed to the back of his tiny closet. He arrived at Mount Zion at 9:45 and sat in his truck, watching other congregants arrive. Families with children dressed in their Sunday best. Elderly couples helping each other carefully up the steps, young people laughing and greeting friends. Everyone was dressed nicely, much nicer than him, and he felt a moment of panic. Maybe he shouldn't go in. Maybe he didn't belong here. But then he remembered Pastor Samuel's words. Just show up. So he got out of his truck and walked toward the church, his heart pounding with each step. Sister Mary spotted him immediately and waved him over with enthusiasm. There you are, baby. Come on, you're sitting with me today. No arguments. Sister Mary linked her arm through his and led him inside, and Marcus felt like everyone was staring at him. Some people were, actually. Word had apparently spread through the small congregation about what had happened Friday night, about the white man who'd tried to destroy their church and the miracle that had stopped him. People looked at him with curiosity, wariness, and in some cases something that might have been compassion or at least willingness to give him a chance. The service started exactly at 10 a.m. Pastor Samuel stood at the pulpit, looking dignified in a simple black suit. "Good morning, church family," he said, his voice strong and clear, filling every corner of the sanctuary. "Good morning, Pastor," the congregation responded in unison, their voices blending into one. "We have much to thank God for this morning," Pastor Samuel continued, his eyes sweeping across the congregation. "We have witnessed a genuine miracle in our midst. We have seen the power of persistent prayer and the reality of divine intervention in human affairs. But more than that, we have been given a sacred responsibility to show the world what the kingdom of God actually looks like, to demonstrate that no one is beyond redemption, to prove that love is stronger than hate." He looked directly at Marcus, and Marcus felt every eye in the church follow the pastor's gaze. "We have a new member joining us today. His name is Marcus Webb. Some of you already know his story. For those who don't, I'll share it now because it's important and because we don't keep secrets in God's house. On Friday night, Marcus came to this church with the intention of destroying it. He had legal permission to demolish this building, and he had hatred in his heart toward all of us because of the color of our skin. But Jesus Christ himself appeared and stopped him. Then Jesus commanded us to love Marcus, to teach him, to disciple him, to show him what authentic Christianity looks like. And that's exactly what we're going to do, because that's what Jesus commanded. There was silence in the sanctuary. Some people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Others nodded in agreement. A few looked skeptical. Pastor Samuel continued with conviction. "I know this is hard for some of you. I know it's easier to hate those who hate us. It's easier to condemn those who come with harmful intentions. It's easier to hold grudges and nurse old wounds. But Jesus didn't call us to do what's easy. He called us to do what's right. He called us to love our enemies and pray for those who persecute us. He called us to be instruments of transformation, not judgment. He called us to be more concerned with redemption than revenge." The sermon that followed was powerful and direct, about the prodigal son who wasted everything and came home broken. Pastor Samuel preached with passion about a father who didn't wait for his son to prove himself worthy but ran to meet him while he was still far off. "Love doesn't wait for worthiness," the pastor declared. "Love rushes toward the broken and the lost. Love celebrates redemption, not perfection." Marcus sat there with tears streaming down his face, not even trying to hide them anymore. After the sermon came singing, and the congregation's voices raised in hymns that seemed to shake the very foundations of the building. Marcus tried to sing along, stumbling over words he didn't know, his voice cracking with emotion, but he sang. He lifted his voice with theirs. He became part of something bigger than his pain. When the service ended, people approached Marcus, not everyone, but enough. They shook his hand. They welcomed him with varying degrees of warmth. Some were genuinely friendly, others were politely distant. All of them were civil. No one was hateful, no one threw his sins in his face, no one told him he didn't belong. And that grace, that undeserved grace, broke something open in Marcus that had been closed for 42 years. He was home. Over the following months, Marcus established a routine that became the foundation of his new life. Every Saturday he worked at the church, doing whatever needed to be done. Every Sunday he attended service, sitting with Sister Mary and slowly learning the hymns. Every Tuesday night he met with Pastor Samuel for Bible study. And every day he fought against the old programming in his mind, catching himself when old hateful thoughts tried to surface, choosing love when hate would have been easier, taking one small step at a time toward becoming someone new. 6 months after that Friday in June, Marcus stood in front of the congregation on Christmas Sunday. His hands shook as he gripped the pulpit, looking out at faces that had become familiar and dear to him. "My name is Marcus Webb," he began, his voice barely above a whisper, "and 6 months ago I tried to destroy this church." He told them everything, about his father's hatred, about 42 years of believing lies, about the sledgehammer and the demolition permit, and the moment Jesus appeared, about the grace he didn't deserve, and the transformation that was still happening inside him every single day. "I came here to destroy your church," Marcus said, tears streaming freely down his face, "but you destroyed my hatred instead. You demolished my prejudice, you tore down the walls around my heart, and then you rebuilt me into something I never thought I could be. So thank you for obeying Jesus when it would have been easier to hate me. Thank you for showing me what grace really means. Thank you for saving my life." When Marcus finished speaking, there was a moment of profound silence. Then Sister Mary stood up. Then Mother Eunice. Then one by one, the entire congregation rose to their feet, not applauding, but standing as witnesses to what God could do with a willing heart. Then they began to sing. Amazing grace filled the sanctuary, and Marcus stood at the front, overwhelmed by the beauty of voices raised in worship. After the service, Pastor Samuel found him sitting alone in the sanctuary, staring at the altar where his life had changed forever. "You did good today, son. You told the truth, and you gave glory to God." Marcus looked at his pastor, this man who had shown him grace beyond measure. "What do I do now, Pastor? Where do I go from here?" Pastor Samuel sat beside him. "You keep doing what you've been doing. You keep showing up. You keep working. You keep learning. You keep transforming. But Marcus, there's something else. I think eventually, when you're ready, you need to start telling your story to others, not just to us, but to the world. There are people out there just like you were, carrying inherited hatred, believing unquestioned lies. They need to hear that change is possible." The thought both terrified and excited Marcus. "You really think people would listen to someone like me?" "I know they will. Because your story isn't really about you, Marcus. It's about Jesus. It's about what he can do with a broken life when someone finally surrenders and says yes to transformation. Your story is proof that no one is beyond redemption. That's a message this world desperately needs to hear." As Marcus drove home that Christmas evening, he thought about how far he'd come in 6 months. From a man consumed by hatred to a man learning to love. From destruction to redemption. From death to life. His phone rang. It was Sister Mary. "Marcus, baby, you're coming to Christmas dinner at my house tomorrow. 2 p.m. Deacon Washington and I won't take no for an answer." Marcus felt tears spring to his eyes again. "Sister Mary, I don't want to impose on your family. Child, you are family now. That's what these past 6 months have been about. You're not a project. You're not a charity case. You're family. Now you like ham or turkey better?" "Both," Marcus said, laughing through his tears. "Both sounds perfect." That night, Marcus sat at his kitchen table looking at the 3 photographs of his mother. He thought about what she would think if she could see him now. Attending a black church, learning to love people she would have loved, following the Jesus she'd tried to show him before his father's poison took root. He opened his journal and wrote, "6 months ago I was dead inside. I was so full of hate that there was no room for anything else. No room for love or hope or joy or peace. Just hate eating me alive from the inside out. But Jesus met me in my worst moment. He stopped me from destroying a church, and then he destroyed the hatred destroying me. And these beautiful people at Mount Zion, they could have turned me away. They could have called the police or pressed charges, or told me to never come back. They had every right, but they didn't. They chose to love me instead. They chose to show me what grace looks like in action. They chose to invest in my transformation even when I didn't deserve it. I'm not the same man I was 6 months ago. I still have a long way to go. I still catch myself thinking things I shouldn't. I still have to consciously choose love over hate sometimes. But I'm different. I'm being transformed. And I'm so grateful, so incredibly grateful that Jesus didn't give up on me. That this church didn't give up on me. That there's still time to become who I was meant to be all along. Marcus closed the journal and looked at his mother's picture one more time. "I'm trying, Mom," he whispered. "I'm finally trying to be the man you raised me to be before everything went wrong. I think you'd be proud." Outside, snow began to fall softly on Alabama, a rare Christmas miracle. Inside his small trailer, Marcus Webb knelt beside his bed for the first time in 27 years and prayed. Not the angry, bitter prayers of his youth. Not demands or accusations. Just gratitude. Pure, overwhelming gratitude for grace he didn't deserve and a second chance he'd never thought possible. In the morning he would go to Christmas dinner with his new family. Next week he would return to Mount Zion and continue his journey of transformation. Next month he would start sharing his story with others who needed to hear that change was possible. But tonight he simply knelt in the quiet darkness and thanked God for the day a sledgehammer met a miracle and hatred finally lost to love. The man who had come to destroy a church had been destroyed and remade instead. And in that destruction and remaking he had finally found what he'd been searching for his entire life. He'd found home. He'd found family. He'd found purpose. He'd found Jesus. And he'd found himself. The end was really just the beginning. The story of Marcus Webb and Mount Zion Baptist Church would continue for years to come. But on that snowy Christmas night, as a transformed man knelt in prayer, the most important chapter had already been written. Love had won. Grace had triumphed. And one more lost soul had finally found his way home. The cruelty of hatred almost destroyed Mount Zion that June morning. But what Marcus discovered changed everything. You can't demolish faith with a sledgehammer. This story reminds us that no one is beyond redemption when divine grace intervenes. The congregation at Mount Zion could have chosen revenge. They could have pressed charges. Instead, they chose to obey Jesus' hardest command: love your enemies. Sister Mary's words echo with profound truth. Grace isn't something you earn, it's something you respond to. Marcus spent 42 years serving inherited lies. But in one miraculous moment, those lies shattered. His transformation didn't happen instantly. It happened one choice at a time, one day at a time, with a community willing to invest in his healing. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear that change is possible. Have you ever witnessed someone's complete transformation? Or struggled to forgive someone who hurt you deeply? What would you have done if you were in that congregation? Share your thoughts below.